Senator McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to move an amendment to Part B of the motion that reads, in respect of the Sydney Airport Demand Management Amendment Bill 2024, the provisions of the bill be referred to the Rural and Regional Affairs and Transport Legislation Committee for inquiry and report by the 31st of January 2025. I'd also, if possible, be able to speak to my amendment. Obviously, the bill which was handed to the Parliament yesterday, midday yesterday, 53 pages of legislation that essentially changes the slot management system into Sydney Airport, access into Sydney Airport, our busiest airport in this country, for the biggest changes for 3 decades. I want to take this opportunity to thank the crossbenchers who last year worked with me to set up an inquiry into the Qatar Airways decision, which really unmasked the government's lack of action around competition in the aviation sector and around these very long-standing protected relationships. The Prime Minister and Alan Joyce notwithstanding, goes back a long time and has had significant impact on the reliability and on the price of aviation for everyday Australians. I believe the significance of this change requires a longer inquiry. I appreciate the government wants to get this through before going to an election, and I don't want to be standing in the way of actually changing a regulatory environment that is costing Australians each and every day. But I do believe it is this chamber's responsibility to give the committee and stakeholders a chance to actually have an authentic and genuine engagement with the material, with the bill, and provide once again the Senate and the government with sensible recommendations, as we did with the bilateral Senate inquiry last year. That is why I'm not seeking an endless inquiry. This is a government-controlled legislation inquiry. I know senators right now and committees are very pressed for time, and this will require more than 2 hearings to actually do it justice and to actually get it written and reported on in time for our next sitting date. Doesn't really allow the Senate, if there are more submissions than we expect or there are more complexities that we've already uncovered in the brief time we've had the legislation before us, it won't actually allow us the opportunity to extend the inquiry, which is why I've set the date at the 31st of January so that the report can actually be delivered in time for the legislation to appear before the Senate and to have it debated and moved prior to heading to an election. I know that the crossbench and the Greens supported the setup of that bilateral inquiry. It actually handed down an incredibly sensible array of recommendations. The Harris Review has been around for a while. My initial reading of this bill sees that it doesn't actually implement the Harris Review recommendations, as the government's running around and saying. It actually only implements a couple of them. And so there is some sensible work that can be done by senators and in conjunction with stakeholders to actually ensure that this bill and the problems with getting access into Sydney from right around the country can actually be addressed. So I implore the crossbench, I implore the Greens to reconsider their position on extending the date. It's great to see the chamber has realised this is an issue Australians care about and that we're prepared to now have an inquiry. But let's make it an inquiry that doesn't hold the bill up unnecessarily prior to an election, but that will actually allow us to do our job and provide sensible recommendations, as this Senate and this particular committee has done in the past. I commend my amendment.
Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Is there